Financial Services Minister Brent Simonet addresses that recent European Union blacklisting in Parliament.
Plans underway for the establishment of the Office of the Spouse of the Prime Minister. We'll tell you which ministry will house that straight ahead.
Trainers here at Better Bodies Gym saddened by the murder of a decorated bodybuilder.
Shocked and very concerned. That's how the former State Minister of Legal Affairs, Damian Gomez, says he feels about the controversial OBAN deal.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, in the wake of the Bahamas blacklisting by the European Union, Financial Services Minister Brent Simonet is accusing the last Christie administration of dropping the ball, leading the EU to place the Bahamas on a list of non-compliant tax jurisdictions. Jasmine Brown reports.
While Simonet insisted he did not want to play politics, he did play the blame game, as he says the former Christie administration contributed to that recent European Union blacklisting.
We're not being political about this issue. The facts are stubborn. They are what they are, and we'll move on.
During his contribution to the mid-year budget debate in the House of Assembly, Simonet sought to justify the country's addition to the EU blacklist by insisting the Minister's administration is working against a backlog of failures to address concerns from the past.
So we're seeing times during the former administration where letters were not answered, where action was not taken, and we're working against that background. And we will continue to make sure that continue to happen. The facts will come out. So the other side can make. If you want to, we'll lay the letters from January 27th. No answer. The date 2016. 17. Yeah. No answers.
His comments did not sit well with Davis, who said this is a matter that should be approached on a bipartisan basis. He called on Simonet to stop pointing fingers and find solutions.
This is a matter that we thought we'll approach it on a bipartisan basis, and they continue yet to point the finger at the previous administration. And the record could show where the issue really lies. We don't want to get into that. Let us get to resolving and removing the country off the blacklist instead of pointing fingers.
Simonet agreed, saying there should be a bipartisan approach moving forward. The Bahamas was added to the EU's blacklist on March 9th. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Peter Turnquist and Simonet traveled to Brussels ahead of the blacklisting to petition the EU Council, maintaining that the Bahamas has done what is necessary to meet its criteria. On the heels of that blacklisting, Simonet revealed that the government will examine if it needs to name an ambassador to the EU to ensure there is an accurate understanding of the Bahamas' position moving forward. He added that progress is being made toward meeting the December deadline for full compliance.
The Speaker, notwithstanding the positive work already being undertaken, we have made a high-level commitment to discuss and address the concerns of the Code of Conduct Group by the end of 2018 and to ensure that the Bahamas is delisted as soon as possible.
The Financial Services Minister says he could not say much more as discussions with the EU are ongoing and sensitive. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, as the blame game begins, the Minister of Finance assured Bahamians that government is working to strengthen diplomatic relations with the EU and get the Bahamas off that list in the shortest time possible. Jillian Gray has that.
The government is working in earnest to secure the Bahamas' early exit from the European Union's blacklist, according to Minister of Finance Peter Turnquist, who says he's confident after meeting with the EU officials and the Code of Conduct Group that the Bahamas will be removed in a matter of months.
Because the matter has to get back onto the agenda of the European Finance Ministers Council. That can be as early as next month, or it could be as late as May. But we have commitment from the Code of Conduct Group, the EU's Code of Conduct Group, that we have submitted all the information that we need to submit, and now it's on them to act. And so we await their schedule, and we hope that will happen as soon as possible.
Back in January, the EU warned that the Bahamas could be blacklisted. Turnquest said at the time he was confident that would not happen. However, on Tuesday, the Bahamas was in fact blacklisted due to what the EU described as the Bahamas' failure to address all of its concerns and make certain commitments at the highest political level. The EU has set a December 28 deadline for full compliance with the criteria outlined. Turnquest has insisted the Bahamas is fully lined up and scheduled to meet that deadline. He says the government will introduce the necessary legislation in the House of Assembly in April.
Bahamas has made commitments to the EU with respect to adjusting legislation as well as not permitting the presence of companies in the Bahamas without economic substance, particularly for the purposes of avoiding or shifting profits to our jurisdiction for tax reasons. And we can stand by that commitment, and we're making the changes, as I say, that are necessary. In fact, the first piece of legislation we expect to be tabled in Parliament in April of this year to address some specific concerns around this issue.
Turnquest noted that the European Union's primary concern is the protection of its tax base. The Council has sought to ensure multinationals pay taxes where they generate profits. In response to claims that the Minnis administration did not do enough to avoid being blacklisted by the EU, the finance minister asserted that when the EU wrote to the government and gave it until February 28th to respond, a response signed by the financial secretary was submitted 20 days before the deadline. However, that wasn't enough for the EU, which wrote the government again on March 2nd to express its dissatisfaction with the Minnis administration's response. The finance minister says the government will do all it can to develop a higher diplomatic relationship with the EU.
We are certainly lobbying and constant contact with them to try and push this issue onto the agenda, hopefully for a favorable result as quickly as possible.
St. Kitts and Nevis and the U.S. Virgin Islands were also added to the European Union's blacklist last week. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
And Minister of Foreign Affairs Darren Henfield has announced that in just a few weeks, the office of the spouse of the Prime Minister will be established under his ministry. Jared Higgs has the details.
3 months after Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis' wife, Patricia, called for the establishment of an office of the spouse of the Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister Darren Henfield revealed that Mrs. Minnis will get her wish. Henfield told Parliament that this office will be established under his ministry in short order.
Adopted at the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit in September of 2015. It is our view that the weight of that office, which will engage in the forum.
Back in December, while hosting a luncheon sponsored by the Bahamas branch of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, the Prime Minister's wife told those in attendance that she had already submitted a proposal for an office of the spouse of the Prime Minister to Cabinet. While some have criticized the proposal due to the anticipation that it will incur significant costs to the public purse, Henfield noted that Mrs. Minnis will not be receiving a paycheck.
Staffing will be provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from existing staff to assist her with her clerical issues, to assist her with travel arrangements and to keep the kind of connection that we need with CARICOM and CARIWAC and the UN, those agencies that she will be dealing with.
Henfield says, among other things, the office will focus on the health and well-being of women. Prime Minister Minnis recused himself from the cabinet discussions on the matter.
Hopefully the office will become established. I can tell you that when we discussed this matter, the Prime Minister recused himself from cabinet. This is a government decision to do. He recused himself because, quite frankly, he didn't want to speak to it. He didn't wish to speak to it. And so we did it as a cabinet.
The Foreign Affairs Minister also addressed the increased scrutiny that Mrs. Minnis may attract as a result of her new office.
There's always a concern for that. You know, we live in an environment where social media is always rife and very vitriolic. And so there's always that environment, and there's always the potential for that. But what can we do? Should we just hide away and not offer ourselves to help grow and make the Bahamas a better place? No, you grab the courage of your conviction, as she has done, and you move forward to progress the development of this country.
Now, Henfield says this position won't be a paid one as Mrs. Minnis looks to advance the role of women in government. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Well, the cost of work permits will soon double from $1,000 to $2,000, according to Immigration Minister Brent Simonet, who put the public on notice that immigration fees will increase this summer. Simonet says this is the first fee hike in 10 years.
Immigration fees will also be increased. These have not been increased since 2008. So we'll publish a full listing of those fees. I will say that one of the biggest area effective is the lowest level, which has been $1,000 for a work permit. That will be going to $2,000 for a work permit. So that's it. And then the changes will be to be changed.
Simonet also reaffirming the government's commitment to reviewing immigration laws, noting the move is vital to correct ongoing issues plaguing the Department of Immigration.
What we need to do now, Mr. Speaker, is look at the law as it exists, and the government is committed to filling the office of Law Reform Commissioner, and will shortly be appointing a person to hold that office. Now, that will be, obviously, is in the Office of the Attorney General. That person will be, as is the name attributes, responsible for looking at law reform. So immigration will be one of those issues.
In other news, a blow to the local bodybuilding community this past weekend after a decorated competitor was murdered. Kyle Joaquin reports.
Friendly, outgoing, godly man.
Bodybuilders, trainers, and clients at Better Bodies Gym struggling to hold it together after learning that one of their own was murdered Saturday night. 70-year-old Paul Melbourne, a beloved trainer and former bodybuilder, was found in his McKinney Drive home with multiple stab wounds. He was pronounced dead in hospital. Police believe Melbourne was murdered following an altercation with a woman. And now the bodybuilding community is mourning this tragic loss.
We became kind of close as bodybuilders. All of us was bodybuilders. And so Melbourne was one of the first bodybuilders for the Bahamas who ever won a medal at the CACs. He won a gold medal and a silver medal, I think it was, at the CACs. And he was kind of like one of the guys who always encouraged the up-and-coming younger bodybuilders. And he always something nice to say to you.
The impact Melbourne had on trainers and competitors spanned generations. A wall in Better Bodies Gym dedicated to his victories as a veteran bodybuilder. One picture showing a stand filled with his trophies. Tino Brennan recalls his last conversation with Melbourne just days before his death.
I said to him, I appreciate everything you've done for me in hiring me in 1992, my first job. And I just want you to know that while you're alive, I want to say this to you. I say, I appreciate everything you have done. I respect you in the field of bodybuilding and everything you accomplished. And I just want to tell you this while you're still alive, because you don't know what's going to happen when we separate. And he shook my hand, and he smiled, and he hugged me, and he said, thank you very much.
Police have one woman in custody in relation to the matter. She was reportedly arrested on the scene. But as they continue their investigation into this latest killing, those who worked alongside him just about every day are recalling fond memories.
Paul was an excellent guy, a role model for us, a lot of the bodybuilders in here, back in the days, a lot of us, grew up watching him on TV and competing for the country and traveling as well.
Now again, police say they have one woman in custody. They will not confirm her relation to the victim, but they say investigations into this matter are ongoing. Reporting for Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
And police on Grand Bahama seizing $1 million in U.S. currency from a home in South Bahamia this morning. Officers of the Drug Enforcement Unit showed up at the residence on Hampshire Drive with a search warrant shortly after midnight. A search of the home revealed the large stash of cash. However, no arrests were made in connection with this discovery. Less than 4 hours later, DEU and Rapid Response Unit officers visited another home on Hampshire Drive, South Bahamia, with a search warrant. Hidden in the ceiling of that apartment was a duffel bag containing $45,000 worth of suspected marijuana and $20,000 worth of suspected hashish. 2 Bahamian men were taken into police custody in connection with the drug find. Both matters are under active police investigation. Still to come on Our News, a former cabinet minister questions if the stripping of part of the environment minister's portfolio is linked to his silence on the Oban deal fiasco. Stay with us.